Story 1. The Bulletproof Business Deal. All right, Northern Ghana. We don't know the exact year, which is somehow more ominous. Just at some point in time, this happened. 16 soldiers from one tribe decided they were going to have themselves a little armed conflict with another tribe. Completely standard, unfortunately, in terms of historical context. Tribal conflicts have been a thing for a very long time. That part's not funny. What is funny, or rather baffling in a way that bypasses funny and goes straight to philosophical, is what they did to prepare. They bought magic protection from a local shaman. Specifically, protection from bullets. Now, before we go further, I want to be respectful here, because traditional beliefs and shamanic practices are a real and meaningful part of many cultures, and I'm not here to dismiss spirituality. I genuinely mean that. However, if you are about to walk into an actual literal gunfight with real bullets fired from real guns, traveling at real velocities through real air, you need more than a vibe. You need more than vibes and a blessing and whatever powder or charm or ritual was involved. You need armor, at minimum, body armor, metal, Kevlar, something with a verifiable track record against projectiles. These 16 men bought what I can only assume was essentially a spiritual insurance policy, and then they walked into gunfire. None of them walked out. Now here's what gets me. 16 people. 16. That's a group decision. That means at some point there was a conversation that went something like, "Hey, should we maybe get some actual protective gear? No, we have the shaman thing. Are we sure that 16 of us are sure? Let's go." Group consensus, democratic process. Everyone agreed, and everyone was wrong. This is what I call the unanimous bad idea problem. It's actually been documented in organizational psychology. It's called groupthink, where a group of people reinforce each other's bad decisions because nobody wants to be the dissenting voice. Everyone assumes if everyone else is fine with it, it must be fine. The problem is that groupthink doesn't stop bullets. And look, I've been in group situations where I went along with something I shouldn't have. Not gunfights, obviously. But I once let my friends convince me to eat at a restaurant with a 2-star rating because everyone else seemed fine with it. My stomach was not fine with it for 3 days. I got food poisoning. They got the Darwin Award equivalent of questionable dining choices. These guys got the actual Darwin Award, collectively. All 16 of them. Which, by the way, I need to flag this. I believe this is the largest single-incident Darwin Award collection in history. 16 at once. There was a shaman somewhere who had an extremely bad day for their professional reputation. Moral of the story? Peer review your protection methods before walking into a hail of bullets. And maybe, just maybe, test the product on something that isn't yourself first. Story 2. The Chernobyl Vacation. Okay, deep breath. This one is simultaneously darkly hilarious and a little bit "are you kidding me?" and historically significant because it earned what the Darwin Award Committee called the first ever collective nomination for a military unit. 2022. Ukraine. Russian soldiers occupy the Chernobyl exclusion zone. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, Chernobyl, 1986, nuclear explosion, one of the worst nuclear disasters in human history. The surrounding area has been a radioactive exclusion zone for nearly 40 years. It's not a secret. It's in every history book. It's been in multiple documentaries. There's a critically acclaimed TV show about it. HBO made it into a whole thing. There is a place near Chernobyl called the Red Forest. It's called the Red Forest because the trees literally turned red from absorbing so much radiation when they died. The name is extremely on the nose. The forest is red. It is radioactive. It is named for being radioactive. The Russian soldiers set up camp there. And then, and here's the part that ascends this beyond a regular mistake into something almost artistic, they decided to dig trenches in the radioactive soil, throwing radioactive dirt in the air, breathing radioactive particles, sleeping in radioactive trenches for days. Now, I understand they were soldiers following orders and operating in a conflict zone, and the human element here is genuinely tragic, but from a purely logistical, what were the decisions made standpoint, someone looked at the red forest, the red-colored, famously cursed, internationally notorious HBO series famous nuclear disaster zone, and said, yeah, dig in here. A Geiger counter, which is the device that measures radiation, would have started screaming immediately, like not subtly, not elevated readings, more like Mayday, Mayday, abandoned position, if anyone had a Geiger counter, which apparently was a problem. Reports suggest the soldiers either didn't have proper radiation detection equipment, or had equipment and didn't know how to use it, or had equipment, knew how to use it, saw the readings and thought, that can't be right. That last option is the one that keeps me up at night. Because I have done that, not with radiation, but I've looked at a meter or a gauge or a warning indicator and thought, that seems wrong, it's probably fine. The warning light in my car came on once. I drove for another 2 weeks. It was not fine. My mechanic had several feelings about it. The difference is, my mistake cost me money. Their mistake cost them significantly more. The Darwin Award Committee called this the first collective military nomination, a whole unit nominated together for marching into one of the most radioactively contaminated areas on Earth and then landscaping it by hand. The red forest, it's in the name. Red means stop. Red means danger. Red means do not come here and do not dig. I have so many questions about the chain of command that led to this decision, and none of them will ever be answered satisfactorily. Story 3. The FPV Drone Catcher. We're staying in Ukraine because apparently 2024 was a very productive year for this video series. FPV drones. For those unfamiliar, FPV stands for first-person view. These are small, fast, agile drones that a pilot controls remotely through goggles, seeing exactly what the drone sees. They're used in racing, they're used in filming, and in modern warfare, they're used as precision munitions, meaning a small drone that flies directly at a target and explodes on impact. They are, to put it simply, flying bombs. Small flying bombs, fast, maneuverable, designed to detonate on contact. Our story involves a Russian soldier who encountered one of these drones and made a decision that I genuinely cannot explain using any framework of logic available to me. He caught it. With his hands. Bare hands. No equipment, no protective gear, no robotic arm or blast shield or any of the many, many tools that a rational person might reach for in this situation. He saw a drone coming, a drone he presumably knew was a weapon, and he reached out and grabbed it. Now, I want to try to be charitable here. Maybe he panicked. Maybe the instinct just kicked in. You know how sometimes your brain does something before you've consciously decided to do it? Like a ball flies at your face and your hands just go up. Reflexes are a thing. But here's the problem with the reflex theory. FPV drones are loud, they buzz, they whine, they make a distinctive sound that you absolutely hear before they arrive. There's time to not catch it. There's time to, for example, run in the opposite direction, or dive, or do anything other than reach out and grab the tiny flying explosion. He grabbed it, and then it did what it was designed to do. I genuinely cannot watch a flying disc, a frisbee, anything airborne the same way anymore. My brain now has an extra step. Is this thing armed? For most people, the answer will always be no. For this gentleman, the answer was very much yes. Darwin Award? Yes, obviously. But also this one comes with a note that says, please, in any situation involving small flying objects in a conflict zone, let the thing pass. Story 4. The Vietnamese Detonator Demonstration. All right, 2005, Vietnam. A man named Nguyen, which, for context, is one of the most common surnames in Vietnam, so this tells us almost nothing about who specifically we're talking about, which is maybe for the best. Nguyen has in his possession an old detonator, a blasting cap, the kind of device that, when triggered, creates an explosion designed to set off a much larger explosive. It is, at its core, a small thing whose entire purpose is to cause a bigger explosion. He has an argument with someone about whether or not this specific detonator still works, and here is where I need you to really sit with me, because this is the moment, this is the fork in the road. On one side, good question, maybe we don't find out. On the other side, what Nguyen did. He put the detonator in his mouth to prove it wouldn't go off, to demonstrate that it was inert, safe, no longer functional. His method of proving this was to place the live end in his mouth and then connect the wires to a 220-volt power socket. And I'm trying to understand the logic chain here. Walk with me. Step 1, someone says, I think that detonator still works. Step 2, Nguyen says, no it doesn't, watch. Step 3, rather than, throwing it at a wall or putting it in a bucket of water or literally any form of remote testing, he puts it in his mouth. Step 4, he plugs the wires into a live electrical socket. Step 5, science happens. Now, there are so many alternative demonstration methods available to a person who wants to prove a detonator doesn't work. You could attach it to a string and trigger it from a distance. You could put it in a box. You could take it outside and stand very far away. You could hire an actual explosives professional to evaluate it. The mouth was not on my list of options. The mouth was not on anyone's list. The mouth is specifically the opposite of where you should put an explosive device you're trying to test. The part that gets me, the part that I keep coming back to, is the 220 volts. He didn't just put it in his mouth and think about plugging it in. He actually plugged it in. He completed the circuit. He committed to the experiment with full physical follow-through. That is a level of dedication to proving a point that I respect even as I cannot comprehend it. I have made arguments before. I have been stubborn. I have doubled down when maybe I shouldn't have. I once argued with my friend for 20 minutes about whether a tomato is a fruit or a vegetable, and I was agitated about it. I was committed to that bit. I did not put anything in my mouth to prove my point. I think that's where I drew my line, and I'm grateful for it. Darwin Award, presented posthumously, with genuine bewilderment. The detonator did, in fact, still work. He proved his friend right, in the most ironic way imaginable. Story 5. The world's most counterproductive quality check. And finally, we close with a story that is so perfectly, geometrically stupid that it almost feels fictional. It feels like something a writer would invent as a cautionary tale, and yet, here we are. 2003. Location unknown. A man attempts to rob someone. He points his gun, he pulls the trigger. The gun doesn't fire. Now, this happens. Guns malfunction. It's called a misfire. Professional firearms trainers spend time teaching people what to do when this happens. There are protocols, safe protocols, protocols that involve not pointing the weapon at yourself. Our man is not a professional firearms trainer. He looks at the gun. He thinks, Why didn't that work? And then, and please follow the logic here, or rather, try to follow the logic because I'm not sure logic is the right word, he looks directly into the barrel to see what the problem is, and he pulls the trigger again. I'll let that settle. He looked down the barrel and pulled the trigger to see why it wasn't firing. The gun, apparently having just needed a moment, fired. I genuinely don't know where to begin with the troubleshooting methodology here because this is the single worst diagnostic approach I have ever encountered. Not just in guns, in anything. Like, imagine your car won't start. You pop the hood, you lean your face directly over the engine, and then you try to start it again. That is the energy here. That is the decision-making framework. Imagine your computer freezes. You put your face up to the fan vent, and then you spam the restart button. There is something deeply, profoundly human about wanting to look at the thing when the thing doesn't work. I get it. When something breaks, you want to examine it. You want to understand it. The instinct to peer at the malfunctioning object is relatable. The fatal error is combining look at the thing with also activate the thing simultaneously. Those two steps need to be separated by distance, by time, by a wall, by literally anything. I've done dumb troubleshooting. We all have. I've tried to fix electronics while they were still plugged in. I've opened hot things in the wrong direction and burned myself. I once stuck a knife in a toaster. And yes, I know. And I lived to tell the tale only because the toaster was unplugged and I didn't know that and somehow got lucky. I am one unplugged toaster away from this list. But even I, in my worst moments of technical curiosity, have never looked directly at the thing that failed to fire and fired it again toward my own face. That is a level of commitment to understanding malfunction that we can only call brave. Spectacularly misguided, fatally curious, but brave. Darwin Award? Yes, with a note that says, please, if the gun doesn't work, just leave. Leave the scene. Go home. Put it down. Do anything except look into it. Story 1. The Colorado Cowboy. Okay, so the year is 2002, Colorado, United States of America, land of the free, home of the brave, and apparently home of the absolutely unhinged. Our guy is running from the police. Now, I want to pause here because this is already a red flag. If you are running from the police, things have already gone pretty badly. Like, we're already past the part where good decisions were being made. But okay, we're here. He's running. And here's where it gets special. While running, full sprint, I imagine, heart pounding, adrenaline going, he decides to pull out his gun and fire back at the officers over his shoulder. Like, just blindly, not looking. Just pew, pew, pew behind him as he runs. Now, I want to give him a little credit here. That's actually kind of bold. That's main character energy. That's the kind of thing you see in a movie and you're like, wow, this guy is wild. Except in movies, the guy survives. In real life, the laws of physics are less cooperative. Because one of those shots, one of those wildly aimed over-the-shoulder while running shots, managed to swing around and hit himself in the head. I'll give you a moment. Yeah, he shot himself while running from the cops with his own gun over his own shoulder. I genuinely cannot wrap my head around the geometry of this. Like, I've tried to visualize it. The angle, the trajectory. At what point does a bullet leave your hand going forward, somehow curve around and come back to hit the person who fired it? I'm not a physicist, but I feel like this should not be physically possible. And yet, you know what's funny? The cops behind him probably had a moment of pure confusion, like, did we shoot him? No. Did he stop? Sort of. Did he fall? Yes. What just happened? Nobody knows. This man was so committed to the bit that he literally took himself out before the police even had to do anything. That is, unironically, a level of efficiency I respect. The Darwin Award Committee, by the way, reportedly loved this one. Don't run from the police, and if for some reason you are running from the police, maybe just run. Don't multitask. Story 2. The Three Amigos of Bad Planning. All right, buckle up, because this next one is a group effort. 3 people, 1 plan, 0 survival rate. 2002, Mexico. 3 gentlemen decided they were going to rob an arms dealer, a person whose entire business is guns, a person who is professionally surrounded by firearms. And their plan, their master plan, their carefully crafted strategy was to walk in with a can of pepper spray and a baseball bat. I'm going to let that sink in. Pepper spray and a baseball bat against a guy who sells weapons for a living. This is like deciding you're going to challenge a professional boxer and your training is, I once watched Rocky on TV. Or deciding you're going to outcook Gordon Ramsay with a microwave. The vibes are off. The matchup is catastrophically misaligned. Now look, I've never robbed anyone and I don't intend to start, but even I know that if you're going to walk into a place that has guns, you probably want a gun, maybe, as a baseline? These 3 gentlemen did not have a gun. They had a bat and a spray can. And the arms dealer, shockingly, did not respond well to being pepper sprayed and threatened with a bat. He responded the way a man who has access to an entire inventory of weapons would respond. All 3 of them did not make it out. Now here's the thing. Individually, any one of these guys could have maybe had a chance if his friends had better ideas. But together, they formed a committee. And committees, as we all know, do not produce good decisions. Committees produce compromises. And the compromise here was, okay, none of us have a gun, but what if we had pepper spray and a bat? That's basically 2 things. It is not basically 2 things. It is 2 very inadequate things. This is a masterclass in what strategists call asymmetric disadvantage, which is a fancy way of saying you brought way less to the table than the other guy and are now suffering the consequences. You know what I find most fascinating here? Not the plan itself, the fact that 3 people agreed on this plan. Like in the planning phase, not one of them said, hey, wait, he sells guns. We have a bat. Somewhere in that conversation there was group consensus, enthusiasm even. Yeah, the bat and the spray. Let's go. That's not a robbery. That's a field trip that went wrong. Darwin Award? Yes. Absolutely yes. 3 of them. Story 3. The world's most distracted terrorist. Okay, this one. Jordan. We have a man who has, and I want to be diplomatic here, extremely bad intentions. He plants a bomb in a movie theater. An adult movie theater, and he sets a timer. And then, I don't know if it was curiosity or dedication to the cover story or just impeccable timing, he decides to watch the movie while waiting to leave. And he got really into it. He got so into the movie that he lost track of time. He just completely forgot. In the back of his brain, somewhere, there was a reminder going off. Hey, buddy, bomb, timer, we gotta go. And his brain just went, shh, not now. This is getting good. The bomb went off, with him in the building. Now, I want to be clear, this man had genuinely terrible intentions, and the world is arguably a better place. But from a purely human standpoint, as a person who has also been distracted by a movie before, I understand the psychological mechanism here, even if the context is absolutely unhinged. We've all been there. You're watching something and you tell yourself, okay, after this scene, I'll get up. And then the scene ends and the next one starts and you're like, okay, this scene and then I go. And suddenly it's been 3 hours and you haven't moved. I have personally been late to multiple important events because of Netflix. I relate to the mechanism here, not the bomb, just the getting distracted by the screen part. The bomb part is wild. The truly poetic thing here is the location, an adult movie theater, which means this man was simultaneously A, a terrorist, B, very easily distracted, and C, watching something he probably should not have been watching in the context of his mission. The multitasking failures here are just staggering. There's a word for this kind of situation, and it's called poetic justice. When the thing you were trying to use as a weapon somehow comes back and gets you because you were too distracted by your own plan to execute it properly, that's the universe having a very specific sense of humor. Darwin Award delivered with extreme enthusiasm. And somewhere in a different timeline, a movie critic's review just says, riveting. Absolutely riveting. Could not leave. Story 4. The Ukrainian Fisherman Who Forgot One Step. All right, we're going to slow down for a second and appreciate the elegance of this next one. Ukraine. Date unknown, but that almost doesn't matter. Our man is a poacher, meaning he's fishing illegally, and he has decided that regular fishing is for people who have patience, and he does not have patience. So he comes up with a plan, a big brain plan. He's going to take an electrical cable, hook it up to a power source, throw it in the river, and electrocute the fish. They float to the top, he collects them, done. Easy, efficient, incredibly illegal, but very efficient. Now, electrofishing is actually a real thing. Scientists use it, conservation workers use it. It's a legitimate technique. The difference is that scientists have safety protocols. They wear rubber boots. They have controlled equipment. They know what they're doing. Our guy, he just had a cable and a dream. He throws the cable in the water. Fish start floating to the surface. Beautiful. The plan is working. He's a genius. He's going to have the best fish dinner of his life. He puts on his boots, or maybe doesn't even bother with boots, we don't know, and he walks into the river to collect his fish. He forgot to turn off the power. Now, I am not an electrician. I passed high school physics barely, but even I know that water conducts electricity. That's like foundational knowledge. That's something you learn early. Don't touch the electrical thing when it's wet. That's lesson 1. He forgot lesson 1. The current that was just moments ago doing a great job knocking out fish, it now had a much larger target to work with, a human-sized target, standing in the water, holding a bag, ready to collect fish. And here's the most heartbreaking part. He was so close. The plan had actually worked. The fish were there, floating. His dinner was right there. He just forgot the one step between throw cable in water and collect fish, that step being disconnect the power. This is like baking a cake, doing everything perfectly, putting it in the oven, and then when you take it out, you grab it with your bare hands from the oven and burn yourself. The cake was right there. You were so close. Darwin Award, yes, but honestly, respect for the ingenuity, even if the execution had one fatal flaw. The lesson here, and I cannot stress this enough, is make a checklist, a simple checklist. Step 1, throw cable. Step 2, turn off power. Step 3, collect fish. Step 2 is doing a lot of work in that list, and it was skipped. Story 5. The Swiss Lieutenant versus Basic Military Logic. And finally, we arrive at my personal favorite, the one that makes me simultaneously laugh and develop a stress headache. Switzerland, a military exercise. A lieutenant, meaning this is not a new recruit. This is someone who has been in the military long enough to be put in charge of people, decides he is going to demonstrate a bayonet charge to his troops. For context, a bayonet is a knife that attaches to the end of a gun. It's a melee weapon. It was very useful in the 1800s. We are not in the 1800s. The soldier he chooses to demonstrate this on is armed with a fully automatic rifle. Let me paint this picture for you. On one side, a lieutenant with a knife on a stick running forward. On the other side, a soldier with a weapon that fires hundreds of rounds per minute, looking confused and increasingly concerned. The lieutenant charged. The soldier, presumably thinking, "I genuinely cannot believe this is happening," fired. The lieutenant received a bullet. And then, and this is the part that makes this legendary, he received a Darwin Award. I want to zoom in on the decision-making process here, because there are several points where this goes wrong, and each one is a gift. First, someone decided this demonstration was a good training exercise. Who? The lieutenant himself. He planned this. Second, when he was looking for a soldier to demonstrate on, he chose someone who was already holding an automatic weapon. He could have asked someone to put the gun down first. He did not. Third, when he began his charge, the soldier with the gun was presumably right there, in front of him, gun raised, and the lieutenant thought, "You know what? I'm committed to the bit." There's something almost admirable about the commitment to the demonstration, like he really believed in experiential learning. He was willing to put himself on the line, literally, to make a training point. The point he made, however, was not the one he intended. The point he made was, do not charge at someone with a knife when they have a machine gun. That is a lesson the troops definitely learned that day, just not in the way the lesson was planned. What I find truly incredible is that Switzerland is not exactly a country known for dramatic military confrontations. They're known for being neutral, for watches, for chocolate, and yet somehow they produced this moment. Darwin Award, unanimous, standing ovation from the committee. So I'm walking through this field, right? Beautiful afternoon. Romania in the summer is genuinely gorgeous. I don't know if you've ever been, but the fields out there go on forever, and it smells like grass and fresh air, and it's a lovely place for a walk. I'm 50 years old, I'm in decent shape, I'm enjoying myself. And then I see it, right there in the dirt, half buried, a little rusty, clearly been there for a while, an artillery shell. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh no, he found an unexploded shell and he did something dumb. And I want to stop you right there because that framing is not fair to me. I didn't do something dumb, I did something practical. I am a practical man. I've always been a practical man. Ask anyone who knew me. I found a shell, I wanted to know what was inside. Totally normal curiosity, completely human instinct. So I picked it up, and I looked at it, and I thought, I could call the authorities, I could carefully set this down and walk away and let professionals handle it, or I could just open it myself. And look, I know how to use my hands. I'm not some city guy who doesn't know how things work. I grew up fixing things, engines, fences, whatever. You apply force, things come apart. It's basic physics. So I started working on it, twisting here, prying there, really putting my back into it. It was being stubborn, I'll be honest, real stubborn. But I'm a persistent guy. That's one of my best qualities, actually. I don't give up. I did not give up. I kept going. And then there was a very loud noise and a very bright light. And, that's weird. I'm still thinking about the field, but I don't feel like I'm in the field anymore. I feel like I'm kind of adjacent to the field, like I'm watching it from slightly outside of it. And there's smoke. There's a lot of smoke. and I notice that I'm not holding the shell anymore. Or anything, really. I'm not holding anything. In fact, I'm not sure I have hands. Let me check. Okay, so that's a different situation than I was expecting. Am I? No, I'm fine. The shell probably just... It was a dud, obviously. Old shells are duds all the time. Totally normal. I'm fine. I'm definitely fine. I'm absolutely 100%... Oh, that's what happened. Okay, fair enough. Maybe I should have called someone. Maybe that would have been the more... I'm not saying I was wrong, I want to be clear, but in retrospect, the call the bomb squad option was perhaps underweighted in my decision-making process. Just slightly. By a small amount. All right, moving on. So here's the thing about that night in Cambodia. We'd been drinking. Not a lot, a reasonable amount. The kind of amount where you feel very confident and very funny, and your ideas all seem genuinely excellent. You know that feeling? That feeling where everything you say sounds smart? That feeling. We were at that feeling. There were 3 of us, me and 2 friends. Good guys. Great guys, actually. Very fun to drink with, both of them. And at some point, I'm not totally clear on the exact sequence of events, we found ourselves in a field. Fields are big in these stories, by the way. I don't know what it is about fields. Anyway, we're in a field, and there's a landmine in the field. And one of us, I'm not going to say who, but it was probably Dara, because Dara was always coming up with ideas. One of us said, "Hey, what if we stepped on it?" Now, in the cold light of sobriety, you're probably looking at that and thinking, that sounds like a terrible idea. But you're sober right now. We were not sober right now. We were in that beautiful mental space where stepping on a landmine to see if it goes off sounds less like a death wish and more like a science experiment, a fun one. So I stepped on it. Nothing happened. And I genuinely thought this. See, this is why you don't panic. People panic about landmines. People are very dramatic about landmines. Some of us are just built different. My friend stepped on it. Nothing happened. This confirmed everything. The mine was clearly a dud. We were clearly fine. This was clearly a fun game, and not in any way a situation that should have ended with us being in different zip codes than our own feet. 3rd friend stepped on it. And that's where the night took a turn. Because there was a very significant explosion, the kind of explosion that you feel in your chest, the kind that's more of an event than a sound. And then everything got very quiet and very still, and I remember thinking, that was bigger than I expected. And then I was just here, wherever here is. And I thought about it for a second, and I thought, okay, maybe the mine was not a dud. Maybe the first 2 steps were just like a warm-up, a calibration. Maybe landmines have a first 2 are free policy that I wasn't aware of. But I'll be honest, I'm starting to think that wasn't it. I'm starting to think we made a mistake. Not a huge mistake. Well, okay, it was a fairly significant mistake in terms of consequences. But the logic was sound. You test things. That's science. We were doing science. Drunk science in a minefield at night, but still, I stand by the spirit of the inquiry. Actually, I take that back. I don't stand by anything. I'm dead. It turns out I'm very dead. All 3 of us are very dead, and the mine is completely fine. And somewhere out there, it's still just sitting in that field, fully intact, probably judging us. We deserved that. We deserved all of that. Story 3. The Dog. I want to start by saying that I love Bruno. Bruno is my dog, a beautiful, loyal, absolutely wonderful German hunting dog who has been my companion for 6 years. 6 years of hunting together, 6 years of walks, 6 years of that dog looking at me like I hung the moon. A perfect animal. I also want to say, and this is important, that what happened was not Bruno's fault. Okay? I need that on the record. Bruno is a good boy. Bruno has always been a good boy. Bruno did not mean to shoot me. I know, in my heart, that he did not mean to do it. What happened was I set the shotgun down on the ground for a second. Just a second. I needed both hands for something. I think I was tying my boot or checking something in my bag. I can't remember the specifics. And I set the gun down in the grass, and Bruno was nearby. And Bruno, being a dog, stepped on things without checking what they were first, because Bruno is a dog, and that's what dogs do. And his paw hit the trigger, and the gun went off. And I had a very brief moment of, oh, that's not, and then I was here. And now I'm thinking about it, and I just want to make sure everyone understands that this was an accident. This was a pure, genuine, not anyone's fault accident that happened to me, a responsible hunter, who made one small decision. Okay, I hear myself. I set a loaded gun on the ground near my dog, and my dog stepped on it, and I got shot. And you know what the worst part is? The worst part is that I know the rules. I teach the rules. I have given the safety briefing. I have sat in the class. I have read the literature. I have told other hunters, more than once, with my own mouth, do not set your loaded firearm on the ground. I know. Bruno, buddy, if you're somehow watching this, which you're not because you're a dog, you can't watch YouTube, I forgive you, 100%, no notes, best dog, best boy. It was my fault. I'm so sorry, Bruno. He's probably fine, by the way. Dogs are very resilient emotionally. I'm sure he's completely fine. I hope he's completely fine. All right, look. I need you to understand the mindset. We're in Texas, it's 1999, we're young, we're bored, and we have found an artillery shell. Not a little one, a real one. Big, heavy, clearly military, clearly old, clearly full of something because you can hear it when you shake it. Yeah, we shook it. It didn't go off. That was actually a really good sign. Now, the question on the table, and we genuinely discussed this, like this was a real conversation we had, was how do you get into an artillery shell? Option A, don't. Leave it alone. Call the police. Walk away and have a normal evening. We did not discuss option A. Option B, try to pry it open somehow. Use tools. Apply force. Maybe get a crowbar. We considered this. We didn't have a crowbar. Option C, shoot it. And here's the thing. Here is the actual logic that led to option C, and I want you to follow me on this because it genuinely made sense at the time. A bullet is fast. A bullet is hard. A bullet can go through a lot of things. If we shoot the shell, the bullet might penetrate the casing, and then we can see what's inside. That's the reasoning. It's not crazy reasoning, it's wrong reasoning, but it's not crazy. We had a pistol. We shot the shell. And I want to tell you about the moment right before the explosion, because there was a moment. There was a very brief moment where I could see that something was happening, and my brain started to form a thought, and the thought was, wait, is this? And then the shell went off, and that thought was never completed. And now it's going to bother me for eternity that I never got to finish it. I feel like the thought was going to be something like, wait, is this a bad idea? And the answer would have been yes, obviously yes. Yes, this was a bad idea. This was always a bad idea. Anyone who has ever taken a physics class could have told me this was a bad idea. The two guys who survived could tell me this was a bad idea, and they were standing next to me when it happened. Two of us made it. I did not make it. And I'm not bitter. I'm not bitter about that. Good for them. I hope they went home and thought very hard about their choices and became safer, more responsible adults who never again attempted to open military ordnance with a handgun in a field in Texas. But mostly, I hope one of them became a physics teacher, because someone in that field needed to know some physics. It wasn't me. I know that now. I know that now. Story 5. The Wisconsin Situation. Okay, so, first of all, I'm not dead. I just want to get that out of the way immediately because yes, I'm in this video, and yes, it's called Dumbest Ways People Died, but I did not die. I survived. I am alive. I am a survivor of an incident that I am going to describe as briefly and vaguely as possible because there are family members who might be watching this, and I have a reputation, and I live in a small town in Wisconsin where everyone knows everyone, and I really cannot stress enough how much I do not want this to be the thing I'm known for. Here's what happened. I was home. I was alone. I was relaxing, creatively, in a way that involved a firearm. I know. There is nothing you can say to me that I haven't already said to myself in the ER. Twice. I said it to myself twice, because the first time I was still a little in shock and it didn't fully land, and the second time it landed completely and I had to ask the nurse to leave the room for a minute. The gun went off. I want to be very clear that this was an accident. This was not a plan. Nobody plans this. Nobody wakes up and thinks, today is the day I shoot myself in the... No, it was an accident. An accident that required surgery, and a police report, and a workers' compensation claim. That last part is where it gets genuinely complicated because someone, a real human being with a job and a desk and presumably a normal life, had to read my claim, process my claim, categorize my claim, and then approve my claim. And they did. They approved it. I received money. I received financial compensation for this. Which means somewhere in an insurance office in Wisconsin, there is a file with my name on it and a description of what happened and a dollar amount attached to it. And that file will exist for a very long time. And occasionally someone will come across it while looking for something else, and they will read it and they will have questions. Do I regret it? I regret the gun. I don't regret the general concept. The general concept was a personal decision that I am entitled to make as an adult in the privacy of my own home. The gun was a poor choice of equipment. That's the lesson. That's all the lesson is. Appropriate tool selection. That's it. I'm fine, by the way. I'm mostly fine. Things are different. Certain things that I used to take for granted are no longer available to me in the same way. The doctors were very professional about it. Very calm, very clinical, not a single inappropriate facial expression in that entire ER, which I genuinely appreciated. And I'm alive. I'm alive, which puts me in a different category than everyone else in this video, and I would like that noted, and I would like a small amount of credit for it, and I would like everyone to remember that at the end of the day, I survived. I survived, and I got paid. That's practically a win. Please don't tell anyone my name.
Story 1. The Brazilian Engineering Consultation. Brazil, 2006. Who needs a workshop when you have a driveway? Brazil, 2006. A man has a problem. The problem is he has a rocket-propelled grenade launcher. A grenade launcher. And for reasons that were not fully documented, probably because everyone who could ask was too busy fleeing, he wants to take it apart. Now, disassembling military-grade ordnance is a thing that happens. It's called demilitarization. Bomb disposal units do it. Trained engineers do it. People with specialized tools, safety protocols, blast shields, and years of education do it. It is a real job. It requires equipment and expertise. Our man in Brazil had none of that. What he had was a car. And he thought, what if I just drove over it? I want to take a second to appreciate the creative problem solving here. He looked at a grenade launcher and thought, I need to apply mechanical force to this object. I have a vehicle. Vehicles apply mechanical force to things they drive over. That is not a stupid chain of logic in isolation. That logic works for, like, cardboard boxes, plastic bottles, things that are meant to be crushed. Rocket-propelled grenade launchers are specifically engineered to not respond well to being crushed. They respond by doing exactly what they were designed to do, which is explode. The car exploded. The car exploded. The man did not survive. The grenade launcher, in a sense, won. It was disassembled, just not in the way anyone planned, and over a much larger area than intended. What kills me, figuratively, is the planning phase. Because driving over something with a car requires setup. You don't accidentally run over a grenade launcher. You have to place it, position the car, think about the angle. This wasn't impulsive. He thought about this. He prepared. The execution is where things went sideways. I've done DIY things at home. I've watched a YouTube video and thought, yeah, I can do that. I've assembled furniture without reading the instructions. I once tried to fix my shower and ended up with no shower and a mild flood. At no point did my home repair adventures involve military-grade explosives. That's the difference. That's where I branched off from this particular decision tree. Darwin Award, yes, with a special note in the category of alternative approaches to tool use. And look, if you have a grenade launcher and need to disassemble it, please call a professional. There are people whose job this is. They have equipment. They would very much like you to call them. Story 2. The Gabonese Miracle That Wasn't. Gabon, 2006. A pastor stands before his congregation and makes a claim. The claim is, he can walk on water. Now, this is a bold claim. This is, historically speaking, one of the bolder claims a religious leader can make. Walking on water is not a thing humans do. This is not a disputed fact. It's physics, buoyancy, density. Water doesn't support human body weight without some kind of assistance. And faith has not, in any documented scientific literature, been shown to function as a buoyancy aid. But here's the thing about this pastor. He wasn't just claiming it. He wasn't using it as a metaphor. He wasn't speaking poetically about rising above hardship. He went to the water. He walked in. He did not walk on it. He walked into it. Which is different. Significantly different. In ways that gravity and water density make very clear very quickly. He did not make it back. Now, I want to be genuinely delicate here, because faith is a real and important thing for billions of people, and I'm not in the business of mocking belief. What I'm in the business of mocking is the decision to physically test an unverified supernatural claim in a body of water, in front of people, without a backup plan. Because here's the thing, even if you believe with your whole heart that you can walk on water, maybe test this in a shallow area first? A paddling pool? A bathtub? Work up to the full river situation? Do a proof of concept? Quality control exists for a reason. You don't launch a product without testing. You don't submit a thesis without checking your references. You don't walk on water without first confirming that walking on water is something you can, in fact, do. The congregation watched this happen, which adds a whole additional layer of complicated feelings that I'm not equipped to fully unpack in a YouTube voiceover. What I will say is this. There's something genuinely human about wanting to believe something so much that you skip the verification step. I understand that. I have bought things online based purely on a description and one photo and hoped for the best. Usually this results in a t-shirt that fits like a tent, not a drowning incident. But the impulse, to believe and then act, is deeply relatable. The problem is always the gap between belief and reality, and water is an extremely unforgiving place to discover that gap. Darwin Award, presented with a note reading, "Please always check whether your miracle is operational before the public demonstration." Story 3. The Manila Smoking Break. Philippines, 1999. This one is short, not because it's less interesting, but because the setup and the punchline are so close together that stretching it out would actually rob it of its power. Agents of the NBI, the National Bureau of Investigation, so these are professionals. These are trained government law enforcement personnel. They are in or around a storage area that contains dynamite. Dynamite, as in the explosive, the thing invented by Alfred Nobel, who was so disturbed by what his invention was used for that he left his entire fortune to create the Nobel Peace Prize. That dynamite. They decided to have a smoke, a cigarette break, near the dynamite. The dynamite had opinions about this. I don't know what else to say. I don't know what angle to take that makes this more complicated than it is, because it isn't complicated. It's the most straightforward cause and effect story imaginable. Flame plus explosive material equals explosion. That's it. That's the whole story. The math is extremely simple. No smoking signs near explosive materials are not decorative. They are not aesthetic choices. They are not suggestions. They are load-bearing instructions. They are doing serious, important work. These agents introduced fire near the thing. You know what gets me? These are investigators, people trained to analyze evidence, to draw conclusions from available information, to understand cause and effect. Their entire job is looking at a situation and figuring out what leads to what. And they looked at a situation with fire and explosive materials and did not draw the conclusion. I've ignored warning labels before. I've eaten food past the sell-by date. I've assembled furniture and skipped the tipping hazard warning. We all have. But even in my most cavalier relationship with safety instructions, have never lit a cigarette near a crate of dynamite. That's a line I've managed to hold. Darwin Award, Collective, with a footnote that reads, "No smoking means no smoking." 2.0. Story 4. The Bangkok Sauna. Thailand, 1999. An elderly monk and 3 of his followers decide to build a homemade herbal sauna. And I want to start by saying, saunas are legitimate. Herbal treatments are legitimate. Traditional medicine practices across cultures have real value. I'm genuinely not here to dismiss wellness traditions. But, and this is a big but, there are saunas, and then there are homemade saunas. And the gap between those two things is where today's story lives. Commercial saunas are engineered. Temperature controls, ventilation, safety cutoffs, designed by people who understand thermodynamics and have thought carefully about what happens to a human body in an enclosed, heated space. A homemade sauna built by well-intentioned monks in 1999 in Bangkok, and I say this with respect, may not have had all of those features. The sauna got too hot. Now, getting too hot in a sauna is something your body warns you about. You feel dizzy. You feel unwell. The standard response to this in a sauna is leave, open the door, go outside, sit down, drink some water. The exit strategy for a sauna situation is one of the most accessible exit strategies in existence. The door is right there. All 4 of them, the monk and his 3 followers, did not make it out. Possible explanations. The door was sealed too tightly. The temperature rose faster than expected. The herbal elements added something unexpected to the air. Or, and this is the explanation that a wellness influencer might call extreme dedication to the practice, they simply stayed in too long. There's a thing in sauna culture about endurance, about pushing through the discomfort. And in a regular, well-ventilated, professionally built sauna, that's fine. You push through, you feel cleansed, you feel accomplished. In a homemade, possibly poorly ventilated, extremely hot enclosed space, pushing through is not a spiritual practice. It's a medical emergency. I have been in saunas. I have felt that moment where your body goes, okay, we should probably go now. And every single time, I have listened. Because I am a coward and I like being comfortable. People make fun of me for leaving saunas early. I now feel vindicated. Listen to your body. When your body says, this sauna is too hot and we would like to leave, that is important information. That is your body doing its job. Thank it and leave the sauna. Darwin Award. Collective. 4 recipients. Filed under Wellness Gone Wrong. And somewhere, a professionally built sauna with ventilation and a temperature gauge nods quietly, its entire existence justified. Story 5. The Ohio Spider Situation. Ohio, USA. There were so many other options available. We don't have a year for this one, which honestly feels appropriate. This story is timeless. This story could happen in any decade. This story is eternal. A man has a spider problem, specifically spider webs. In or around his home, there are spider webs, and he has decided that he is done with the spider webs. He wants them gone. He wants them gone. Now, spider webs are annoying. I understand this. I have spider webs in my house. There's something about them that just feels like things are getting away from you. Like if there are spider webs, the spiders are winning, and you cannot let the spiders win. I use a broom, sometimes a vacuum. There are sprays. There are pest control services that will come to your house and handle the whole situation professionally, for money, without fire. Our man in Ohio chose fire. He chose a blowtorch. He went around his property with an actual, literal blowtorch, burning spider webs. Now, I actually want to pause here and say, this is, counterintuitively, not the craziest idea on the surface. Fire does kill spiders. Fire does destroy webs. The elimination vector is sound. The problem is not the goal. The problem is proportionality. The problem is using an industrial flame tool to solve a problem that a $4 can of spray would have solved. This is what experts call using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Except the nut is a spider web, and the sledgehammer is fire, and your house is nearby. The property caught fire. The man did not make it. And somewhere, in a corner of that property, a spider watched this unfold and experienced something that we might describe, if spiders are capable of experience, as profound vindication. The spiders won. I want to sit with that for a moment. He was trying to defeat the spiders. He was so committed to defeating the spiders that he reached past every reasonable option: broom, spray, vacuum, professional help, just walking past the webs and accepting them as roommates, and went straight to blowtorch. And in the end, the spiders were fine. The webs were gone, yes, but the spiders almost certainly evacuated when the fire started. Spiders are fast. Spiders are adaptable. Spiders, it turns out, survive fires better than the people who start them. I have a complicated relationship with spiders now. I respect them. I fear them. And after this story, I have a new layer of respect that is specifically adversarial. Do not go to war with spiders using a blowtorch. You will lose. Darwin Award, yes, with a footnote that reads, "This is what brooms are for."
Story 1. Ohio, USA. Now, I have to be honest with you. We covered a story from Ohio in the last volume. A man, a blowtorch, spider webs, a house fire. The spiders won. And I thought that was it. I thought Ohio had given us its contribution to this series and we could move on. Ohio was not done. Because here, in what I can only describe as Ohio doing Ohio things, we have another man, another spiderweb situation, and another decision that did not go well. This time, the tool of choice was not a blowtorch. This time, our man chose a torch, a handheld flame torch, the kind you use to, I don't know, caramelize a creme brulee or sear a steak or perform controlled burning in a contained environment with proper safety measures. He was not caramelizing anything. He was burning spider webs off his property. Same mission as the previous Ohio gentleman, different tool, same energy, same outcome. The property caught fire. The man did not make it. I don't know what is happening in Ohio. I genuinely do not know what is in the water there that makes men look at a spider web and think, fire, that's the answer. Fire will solve this. I am not from Ohio. I have spider webs in my home. I use a broom. I am going to continue using a broom until I die, and specifically not in the fire I started myself. But here's what gets me about this one. This is now the second Ohio spiderweb fire fatality we have covered. Second, which means there are at least 2 families in Ohio who, when asked how their loved one passed, have to say, spiderweb fire. Not war, not illness, not even a particularly dramatic accident. Spiderweb fire. The Darwin Award for this one came with a note that I imagine just says, Ohio, please, please. And somewhere in a corner of a porch in Ohio, a spider is building a new web, confident, unbothered, knowing history is on its side. Okay. This next one. James, a geologist, which means James has a science degree. James understands the physical world. James has studied rocks and soil and the fundamental properties of matter for years. James had a wasp problem, specifically a wasp nest. And James, being a scientist, being a man of empirical thinking and methodical problem solving, decided he was going to spray insecticide into the wasp nest. Which, fine, that's the correct instinct. Insecticide, wasp nest, logical. The delivery mechanism is where James and I part ways. James used a vacuum cleaner. A vacuum cleaner. He reversed the airflow on his vacuum cleaner, so instead of sucking air in, it was blowing air out, and he used it to spray the insecticide into the nest. Now, I want to pause here and give James some credit, because that is actually clever. That is lateral thinking. That is a scientist looking at available tools and improvising. I respect the ingenuity. I genuinely do. In a different context, that's the kind of creative problem solving that gets you promoted. The problem, and it is a significant problem, is that insecticide is flammable. And vacuum cleaners have motors. And motors produce heat. And heat plus flammable spray equals... The vacuum cleaner exploded. James. James who studied the physical properties of matter. James who understood chemistry. James who had a degree that required him to learn about, among other things, what happens when you introduce a flammable substance to a heat source. James introduced a flammable substance to a heat source. In his defense, and I'm going to try to find a defense here, he was probably thinking about the wasp problem. The wasps were the immediate threat. The vacuum cleaner was the solution. The insecticide was the tool. You get fixated on the goal, and you stop thinking about the steps. I have done that. I have been so focused on solving one problem that I created 3 new problems in the process. I once tried to fix a leaking pipe under my sink. I fixed the leak. I also flooded the cabinet, shorted a power strip, and somehow lost a wrench that has not been found to this day. I did not, however, cause an explosion. That's still the line. That's still where I get to feel slightly better about myself. Darwin Award, yes, with a footnote that says, flammability is not just a geology concept, James. Story 3. Mark the astronomer. A PhD and a ladder walk into an observatory. A man who has spent years studying the universe, calculating orbital mechanics, understanding the forces that governed objects moving through space. A person whose entire professional life involves precision, measurement, and attention to detail. Mark was crushed by a ladder. Not any ladder, the ladder of his own observatory, the one that was there specifically to allow access to the telescope, the one that had, presumably, safety protocols attached to it, procedures, guidelines, a clear, correct way to operate it. Mark violated the safety protocols, and the ladder, which does not have a PhD and does not care about orbital mechanics, responded by doing exactly what physics dictated it would do when the safety protocols were not followed. It came down on Mark. I think about this one a lot. I do, because Mark spent his career looking up, literally up, at the largest things in the universe, galaxies and nebulae and black holes, and the incomprehensible scale of existence. And he was brought down by something approximately 2 meters tall in his own building. The universe he studied so carefully did not get him. The latter did. There's a metaphor there. I'm not smart enough to fully articulate it, but it's there. Something about how we spend so much energy thinking about the big, distant things that we forget to look at what's right in front of us. Or, in this case, directly above us. The safety protocols existed for a reason, Mark. They existed because someone, at some earlier point, looked at that ladder and thought, this could hurt someone if used incorrectly. And they wrote it down. They made a sign. They had a procedure. And Mark, who understood the laws of physics governing objects moving at 70 kilometers per second through space, skipped the ladder procedure. Darwin Award? Yes. With a note that reads, "The universe is not what got you, buddy." Story 4. Dr. Jack Barnes. The man who discovered something, then immediately tested it on himself. 1966. Cairns, Australia. Dr. Jack Barnes, an actual medical doctor, a researcher, a man investigating Irukandji syndrome, a condition caused by jellyfish stings that produces extreme pain, hypertension, a feeling of impending doom, and, in some cases, death. Now, Dr. Barnes was trying to figure out what caused the syndrome, which jellyfish was responsible. This is legitimate science. Important science, the kind of research that helps people. I'm not here to mock the mission. I'm here to discuss the methodology. Dr. Barnes believed he had identified the jellyfish responsible, a small jellyfish, barely a centimeter across, the Irukandji jellyfish, and he needed to confirm his hypothesis. So he did what any dedicated scientist would do. He let it sting him, on purpose. He picked up the jellyfish, he held it against his arm, he let it sting him to confirm that this was, in fact, the jellyfish causing Irukandji syndrome. Now, I want to be clear. This is not entirely unprecedented in the history of science. There's a long tradition of researchers self-experimenting. Barry Marshall drank a petri dish full of H. pylori bacteria to prove it caused stomach ulcers. He won a Nobel Prize. Self-experimentation has a track record. The difference, the key difference, is that Barry Marshall knew H. pylori probably caused ulcers and could be cured with antibiotics. He had a treatment plan. Dr. Barnes knew Irukandji syndrome caused, among other things, a feeling of impending doom and sometimes death, and his treatment plan was, let's see what happens. What happens was Irukandji syndrome, the very syndrome he was studying, which he then had, in his own body, first-hand data, you could say, extremely personal research. He survived, actually. He confirmed his hypothesis. The jellyfish was indeed responsible. The syndrome was named after the region. Dr. Barnes contributed meaningfully to medical science. And then, and this is the part, he was nominated for a Darwin Award anyway. Not for dying, for the sheer extraordinary decision to let a potentially lethal jellyfish sting him on purpose with no clear treatment plan in front of witnesses in 1966 Australia. The Darwin Award Committee looked at this situation and said, "We don't care that you survived." The decision itself was worthy of recognition. I have to say, I respect Dr. Barnes enormously. The courage involved in that moment, holding a jellyfish, knowing what it does, pressing it to your skin anyway. That's a kind of commitment to knowledge that I absolutely do not have. I won't even try a new food without checking if it has nuts in it first. Darwin Award, with enormous respect and a note that says, "Next time, maybe find a volunteer." Story 5. Eric, non-biting Eric, the man who had one rule and one very notable exception. And finally, we arrive at today's masterpiece, Eric. Eric was a yoga instructor in Switzerland, and Eric had a nickname. The nickname was Non-Biting Eric. Which already we have questions. Already, the nickname alone raises so many things. Who gave a yoga instructor a nickname about biting? Under what circumstances was this nickname assigned? What happened in Eric's life that led to non-biting being a relevant descriptor that people felt needed to be attached to his name? I don't have answers to any of these questions. What I have is what happened next. Eric, non-biting Eric, yoga instructor, Switzerland, decided to practice yoga in the ocean, which is, unconventional, but not unreasonable. Yoga on a paddleboard is a thing. Yoga near the water is a thing. People do it. It's a vibe. The specific ocean he chose to practice yoga in contained a shark. The shark bit him on the leg. Eric, non-biting Eric, lost his leg to a shark bite while doing yoga. I need you to feel the full weight of what I just said. A man whose entire identity, whose actual nickname, whose defining characteristic as a human being was that things did not bite him, was bitten by a shark while doing yoga. The universe constructed this situation specifically. There is no other explanation. Somewhere in the fabric of reality, an irony quota needed to be filled, and Eric was the chosen vessel. Now, losing a limb is obviously a serious and devastating thing, and I want to acknowledge that. Eric survived. He lost a leg. That is genuinely terrible, and I'm not making light of the injury itself. I'm making light of the name, of the nickname, of the fact that across what I can only imagine was a lifetime of close calls with animals, dangerous situations, moments where something could have bitten Eric but didn't, the ocean said no, not today. Today, we're doing this. I think about my own nicknames, the things people associate with me, and I'm now genuinely concerned. If I have any nickname that describes a thing that doesn't happen to me, I'm retiring it immediately. Today, right now. I'm not giving the universe any ideas. Eric, I hope you healed well. I hope the prosthetic is comfortable. I hope you still do yoga on land, far from the ocean, with the new nickname. Something like non-sharked Eric. Actually, maybe not. Let's not tempt it. Darwin Award? Yes. With a note that reads, "The nickname was a challenge, Eric. The universe heard you."